when we are brought up in the West, we know all about how Greek ideas changed the world. And maybe when we're a bit older, we learn about the Silk Road and how Chinese invented things like gunpowder, porcelain, and paper. But to this day, most people in the West are completely unaware of India's contributions, although they use these contributions every day.
Hello. Welcome to Tuckered Out with me, Ami Tucker. Today's guest is someone I actually got to meet in real life right before the interview at a very lovely event here in Dallas. And after a couple glasses of wine, I decided to make him an honorary Guju brother. Because, we all know Gujus are the best kinds of Indians. William Benedict Hamilton Dalrymple, and yes, I have to say the whole name because it's awesome, is an India-based Scottish, multi-award-winning, and best-selling historian, as well as a curator, broadcaster, and critic. And I think he's pretty funny. His latest book, The Golden Road, How Ancient India Transformed the World, discusses the ways, basically, in which India's awesome ideas and influences spread throughout the world and shaped Eurasia and the West today, and kind of how we got no credit for it. Basically, we discussed, although we in the West think everything comes from Greece and Rome, we are almost entirely unaware that Indian learning, religious insights, and ideas are actually among the most crucial foundations of our world. Kind of basic questions about what the world is, how it operates, why we're here, how we should live our lives. No big deal. And also, we are the OGs of math. I mean, come on, how many brown kids are in Math Olympics? So can't argue that. It's just a very interesting book, and the way he intertwines stories with history and research, it is mind-blowing. He also signed my book and gave a shout out to my mom, who is obviously from India, has always shouted Jai Hind on the top of her lungs every time she can, and has been a big lover of our culture and religion. So, Mom, this one's for you. Mr. William, thank you for giving me your time during your very crazy book tour, and there will be a part 2 and 3 of this whenever you can. Please enjoy my so fun and so amazing interview with William Dalrymple. So I have to ask you, how was your week in Dallas?
It was quite an experience. It's not every day that you give a lecture in the house of a man who has the statues of fallen Eastern Europe in his shrubbery, still less the commissioned statues of Reagan and Mrs. Thatcher, still less has a shrine to Churchill, and even most probably of all, a shrine to George W. Bush. But that was our host, indeed.
Yeah.
Who we should say was very, very kind to both of us. So we must praise the daubs of George W. Bush to the skies and say, rarely has such an artist walked on this earth.
Yes, I everything you say, I'm agreeing with. This is my second time at the Crow's house. The first time was a gathering of South Asian movers and shakers in Dallas,
of whom there are an improbable number.
As you know, you probably know way more than I do.
Certainly, there seemed to be an impressive roster over the weekend that I was there.
Yeah, I mean, even for me, I'm like, wow, I'll hang out with these people if they want to hang out with me. I'm fine with that. But yes, the Crow and the history of the Crows, and having read a lot about them and then actually meeting them, I was like, okay, things are not always as they seem.
Not at all. Exactly. That often is the case, that you read about people in the newspapers, and you read about people who are made in the newspapers to be saints, and then they turn out to be just complete bastards. And sometimes the opposite is true, which is always nice, when someone who maybe doesn't have a very positive public profile from some angles turns out to be completely charming.
It's funny. It's all about really just talking to people. It's exactly. So simple.
Exactly.
If only the world can understand this now. Okay, so of course, I did my research on you. You have a lot of content out there. People I'm
quite old now. I'm now 60, so I haven't done anything else all my life. So
no, it's amazing. And I was like, how do I talk to a man that has done so much, that has so many titles after his name? So I'm like, you know what? And I've listened to some of your interviews and everyone's asked you, obviously, the basic questions. I want to know, one, your family tree is insane. Like, I don't know what a baronet is, an earl is, a queen. I mean, you're related to Virginia Woolf. That's one aspect of it, which is I feel like that's a whole book you should write right there. But I want to know, you grew up with 4 brothers. Or
That
3.
is
And you're the
absolutely
youngest.
correct, Abby. That is 3 brothers. I was one of 4 brothers. Correct.
One of 4 brothers. So I need to understand how that affected your life.
Oh, in every way. Look at history's top achievers. They're always younger brothers of bigger boys. There were 3 kids in swift succession. Then my mother had a miscarriage and the gap of 5 years. Then she had me, which meant 2 things. One was that I was spoilt completely rotten and loved to death. I was love bombed from the day I entered the world. And B, I was constantly the little kid with the diapers around his knees, running after 4 elder brothers who, just wanted to go and play cricket or just do their own thing and had no interest in this annoying younger sibling who was trailing after them, wanting to be part of all the games. And both things form you. Also, you kind of get to see how your brothers do things right and how they do things wrong, both in terms of school, then university, then girls, then life choices. And so in a sense, you can learn from mistakes and from success of elder brothers. So I while there are certainly disadvantages being the younger, particularly at the time, I think it gets you out.
I'm assuming you got beat up, right, by some of them?
Ignored more than beat up, but my brother up from me, Rob, who is the closest to me now and who I spent an hour on the phone with last night, was the one who beat me up when I was younger.
Okay, love it.
And the one whose nose got most put out of joint by my arrival, because he was this beautiful younger brother, and he's the blondest of us all.
Okay.
You can see I got no hair at all there. But once upon a time I was blonde, but my elder brother Rob was even blonder. And I didn't think he particularly welcomed my arrival on the scene at all. We've only become friends in the last 20 years.
He thought he was the last one, and then he was like, "Wait a minute, how are you here?"
Exactly.
Yeah, totally.
There was a period of my infancy when the boys meant the 3 elder boys, and I was the one, at the back in the nursery, still playing with my toy soldiers and stuff. And those 3 were all playing cricket or going off to watch whatever they were going to watch.
Your mom must have had with 4 men in the house, 5 men in the house. That's quite a journey. She's
always claimed that she liked it. I mean, the response of many visitors was, "God, poor mum." And her response always was that she was very glad she didn't have daughters and she liked her. I don't know whether she'd be loyal or being deluded or being...
I think as mom, I have 2 girls, so I say the same thing. Like, I'm so glad I don't have sons. I think it's just I think you just kind of have to...
Indian mums always spoil their sons.
Yes.
I have grown up with... I mean, I've now been in India from the age of 20 to the age of 60. So I've been in different positions during that time. And exactly the kind of feminist daughters who in their 20s were complaining about Indian mothers spoiling their sons now spoil their sons. And it is the ignored daughters, of course, who kick ass and go on to do award-winning podcasts and play the guitar. And
I have an older brother, so I think if I have to unpeel my brain, I am doing this podcast as the Indian daughter who didn't have that voice in the house, and now I have PTSD. So this is my therapy. Yeah, it's five years of therapy.
But this is the way with so many Indian women, is that they get ignored by their mums and they become tough and wonderful and have to fend for themselves, and I'll kick ass. So
and I'm definitely funnier because of it. So
it
all worked out.
And smarter usually. Yeah.
Okay, I want to know who you were in high school. And, in America, there's tropes, right? Like the nerd, the jock, the blah, blah, blah. It's all mixed now. But if I met you in high school, who would you be?
My housemaster at school, I went to one of those British boarding schools. So I had a housemaster. He always said that I'd changed the least of all the boys he's had in his house.
Wow.
I was always the history nerd from the age of 13. And it wasn't such a great thing to be when you were 13, when everyone else was interested in sport and...
Yeah.
So I was the boy, I don't know whether you have them even in the States. There was a thing in those days called bicycle clips, which was things that you put on the bottom of your trousers to stop your trousers getting caught in your, the ultimate nerd accessory. And there were things that, you used to put them on and go out cycling around Anglo-Saxon churches, which was the kind of thing I really got me excited when I was
That's so cool.
when I was 14 or 15. And I'm nothing if not consistent, actually. I have the same stuff that really turned me on age 14 still keeps me awake at night in my now 60s, astonishingly. Yeah.
That's very rare. And I mean,
it is quite rare, I think. Yeah, I'm very lucky in that I'm the kid who managed to make a career out of his hobby. And whether your hobby is, keeping snakes or making ice cream or whatever it is, if you are that person who can find a way to make a living out of what he really, really loves and can live decently out of that, that's a very good start. Because when you go down to work in the morning, you're not doing groaning because you're going to the really boring office that you hate from people that you hate. You're doing the stuff you want to do. I could genuinely say that if I won the sweepstake tomorrow and suddenly, 6-figure check were to arrive in this house, I think I'd change my life. What I'd certainly do is I'd love to buy a nice beach house somewhere hot or something like that. But in terms of career or life, I don't think I'd change anything.
That's very, very lucky. I feel like we have to give credit to mom and dad for that. Were they help hone this in, or was this like a natural progression?
They did, but there was a third parent who actually probably played as big a role as any, who's still around. And that is my Scottish nanny.
Oh.
And so I had this sort of interesting upbringing. I had 3 parents, literally. I had my dad and my mum, who were quite straightforwardly, you mentioned all those sort of ridiculous relations and all that sort of Scottish toff, sort of Downton Abbey.
I couldn't even pronounce half of it. I was like, he's something.
Don't even bother.
Okay.
But that stuff was very much there in my childhood. And actually, my childhood was pretty Edwardian, to be honest. It was it was really like one of those Russian families in the cherry orchard or something, in a Chekhov play. But then I had, and this spiced things up a bit. I mean, my dad was literally Sword of Honor at Sandhurst, which is, I don't know what the equivalent in America is, gold beret at West Point or something.
Yeah.
Let's
go with West Point.
He was sort of top soldier of his generation, that kind of
amazing.
stuff. But very much in that kind of British imperial mold. My nanny was sort of IRA. She was a Fenian from, not actually literally, but she was quite radical. And she was spirited, and she was very suspicious of the English. And so I grew up at the same time with a father who, he wasn't actually in the army when I was born, but for 20 years of his life, I was the last child at the end when he'd just changed careers but become a businessman. But for all his youth, he was in the British Army. He was at things like Suez and Cyprus Emergency and Partition, 1947. And the creation of Israel and the Nakba of the Palestinians. He was around for all that kind of stuff. And here was me being brought up by someone who taught me to fear the redcoats, and we used to go where Bonnie Prince Charlie was defeated by the English, and go to Robert the Bruce's cave where he, after being defeated by the English, he saw the spider try to make a web and try again, the spider, as it kept falling off the rock, and then eventually it made a beautiful web. These are all sort of stories I was brought up on. I remember we've just done this on my podcast, and these memories all came pouring back of my nanny taking me to the local public library, because we wouldn't have had the books in the house.
Yeah.
And reading to me stuff about what the English did to the Irish at the potato famine. Well, I can't have been more than 6 or 7. And there was this gruesome book that had just come out at that time, which is now a classic, called The Great Famine by, what's she called? It's a classic book. And it was full of these horrific line drawings of starving Irish mothers in their beds with sort of children like skeletons, crawling on the floor. And I remember being deeply traumatized by this.
Yeah, I would think so. It's like a horror.
8.
It's like a horror movie.
In a sense, this is all, I think, very much played into my adult relationship with the British Empire, with the whole story of colonialism, which has really been most of my life's work, and allowed me, in a sense, to see both sides of the story, and not to assume that everyone in a cocked hat and an ostrich feather is an automaton monster, and yet also to understand the violence inherent in colonialism and the suffering of those who were colonized. And that's not a bad upbringing to have, actually, for a historian, to see both sides. Yeah.
It's quite lucky that you were able to be in that environment. So I have to ask, one, This is maybe a little dramatic, but without your nanny in your life, what do you think your path would have been if it was just a one-sided story in your mind? Because we do and listen and say what our parents think.
Well, I mean, certainly my other brothers have all stayed in Scotland, but they have a wide variety. None of them have gone to the army. It's interesting that in a sense, you'd have expected the kids of my father, who was absolutely the establishment incarnate, while also being a funny, wise, clever man. He wasn't a stuffed shirt at all, but he was very much brought up in those ways at that time. I got one brother who is sort of, inherited the family farms and everything in Scotland. One who is a Catholic priest, a completely different life, and very much sort of, on a Friday night when we're all having a dinner party, he's sitting in some hospital somewhere with a parishioner who's dying or got cancer or something.
How does he feel about the American Pope?
I was very pleased with him. He's very pleased. He's a liberal, so he's very. He was dreading another Benedict or some sort of Opus Dei right winger. So he's absolutely thrilled with it. That he's American is irrelevant. That he's a liberal is the key thing in my brother's. Yeah.
I don't know. Right now, everyone hates us, so I'm just like it's hard to ask. Yeah.
Well, everyone outside America has mixed feelings about your government. Certainly, I think most people realize that governments and the people are two very different things.
Yes, it's a very confusing time.
And then I got a third brother who's a designer and who I occasionally work with. I mean, I did an exhibition 2 or 3 years ago, and he ended up doing the catalogue for it. Not because he was my brother, but because he does these beautiful catalogues.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
He's the one that used to really resented me, who's now my sort of closest to the
That
thing.
always happens, right? The blonde one that you wanted to beat up and vice versa. And then I was reading, there's so much more about your background. I would love to learn. I'm going to have to do like a 3-parter with you at some point when your life is calmer.
Yeah. Part 1 today.
Part one, guys. You probably don't remember because it was crazy that evening, but you signed my...
very well with you and your friend, your lovely friend.
Yeah. No, but you signed
You were the bad girls at the back of the class.
Yes, drinking our vodka martinis.
Having a high old time and laughing loudly at all the jokes.
We were, I know. And then our husband was telling us to be quiet, and I was like, well, William doesn't seem to mind us clapping, so it's okay.
I enjoyed them. I always like the wild girls at the back.
Yeah, I actually ended up wanting to ask you a question during the Q&A, but it got too late. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to get him on the podcast. So you had signed my book to my mom, who's from India and very passionate about the history of India and Hinduism and Buddhism. And so she has the book right now. She's reading it. And she's never had a book signed by an author. So and she's 75 years old. So she says hello and she's very excited to read it.
Say hello to your lovely mum.
Yeah. So The Golden Road, How Ancient India Transformed the World. So it discusses the primary route connecting Eurasia from 250 BCE to 1200 CE, a route going through India referred to as the Golden Road. That makes it sound very boring, Abby. Try to describe it. I just want to make sure I got that right because it is, a very historic book.
Let me give a 1-minute pitch for the book.
Go ahead. Give me your pitch.
It's about how Indian ideas change the world. When we are brought up in the West, we know all about how Greek ideas change the world. And maybe when we're a bit older, we learn about the Silk Road and how Chinese invented things like gunpowder, porcelain, and paper. But to this day, most people in the West are completely unaware of India's contributions, although they use these contributions every day. And in the West, the main contributions are mathematics, 0, and the number system we all use. Those digits in front of your laptop, if you're looking at this on a laptop, or on your phone, if you're looking at it on your phone, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 plus 0. Those were an Indian invention. Everyone used either Latin numbers or numbers with symbols that went up to and, changed whenever you reached a new number. What the brilliant Indian idea is that with 9 symbols plus a 0, you can express any number up to infinity. That was a brand new Indian idea, which transformed all our lives. And with that came in time very advanced mathematics in things like what later was known as algebra and algorithms and so on. And these ideas came to Europe through the Arabs. So they used to call them Arabic numbers, which wasn't unreasonable because they got them from the Arabs. But actually, the Arabs got them from the Indians. There's one further stage back beyond that. On top of that, there's this whole world of religion and philosophy, which in historic times completely transformed Asia. Obviously, most of Asia is now Buddhist, which is an Indian religion. The Buddha was born in India on the banks of the Ganges. His ideas were formed in opposition partly, but also coming out of the Hindu and the Jain traditions, and were an argument with both those traditions. He didn't like the sacrifices of Hinduism. He didn't like the austerity of the Jains. The Jains, this very harsh form of ascetic spirituality. And he developed Buddhism as the middle way between them. The middle way is the description. And this traveled all over Asia. And then Hinduism, at a different period, travels to Southeast Asia, and you get the largest Hindu temple in the world, not in India, but in Angkor Wat. So this isn't a history book about India. It's a book about Indian ideas leaving India and transforming everything else in ways that we haven't even begun to take in the West. And the book is obviously done very well in India because it tells Indians exactly what they want to hear. But it's also done surprisingly well in the US, and it went straight on the bestseller list since I've seen you, which is very exciting news.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Congrats. That's awesome.
Straight on the New York Times.
Wow. Congrats.
I suspect 90% of the purchases so far have been the Indian community, but possibly there are a few non-Indians watching this who might buy it too. So.
Tons. And definitely it has spread. I mean, I know I've seen Instagram posts on it from a variety of friends. But also the book is about credit, right? And why India does not get the credit for some of these ideas, or most of these ideas. And you have a numerous amount of articles out in The Guardian. I was reading them. And you asked,
You've been doing your research, Abby. I'm very impressed.
Yeah, I was like, I'd rather read your articles versus listen to your interviews to understand. And your recent one, I think, was September, October. And you asked this question. This is what you wrote. You wrote, if India were acknowledged to already have been a powerful, cosmopolitan, and profoundly sophisticated civilization, then what justification would there be for Victorian Britain's civilizing mission?
So the Brits, in a sense, had a vested value in downgrading India's brilliance. The whole point of a civilizing mission is that you're bringing civilization to savages, and all this stuff of higher philosophy, all this stuff about higher mathematics, all this stuff about sophisticated religious attitudes slightly plays against that, as does Angkor Wat, the Taj Mahal, all the great triumphs of Indian civilization. So it's not a simple process. I don't want to oversimplify it, because there were many Brits in the colonial world who got very excited about Indian civilization and wrote magnificently about it. But there were also those, particularly at the peak of British power in the mid-19th century, who had the attitude of this guy, Macaulay, Lord Macaulay, who said that a single shelf of an English library is worth more than the entire native literature of India and Arabia. And those attitudes entered the educational system, which is why in America and Britain we don't learn anything about the great Indian mathematicians of antiquity. Well, we do learn by the age of 7 about Archimedes and Eureka, or Pythagoras and his frigging theorem. We know that by our 6th or 7th or 8th birthday. But no one's ever heard of Aryabhatta or Brahmagupta, who came up with the numbers we use every day. And it's a bizarre absence in our education that we don't know that.
Yeah, it's kind of sad. I've heard of Brahmagupta. I actually didn't hear about Aryabhatta.
Well, all Indians have heard of Brahmagupta, which is why they get so frustrated that no one else has.
Yeah, exactly. When you were talking at the Crow's house, we were discussing what happened and why there is no credit given to India. And I'm like, maybe we're just bad at marketing it. Maybe Hinduism and Buddhism is just not an aggressive enough religion. Our culture is not aggressive enough in terms of wanting to spread the word.
It's a complicated series of things, I think. Partly it's colonialism, as I said.
Okay.
That's a major part of it.
So colonialism,
But partly, I think it's that India didn't develop the way that, Southeast Asia or China did in the 60s and 70s, and remained, in the eyes of the world, a poor country right up until the last 10 or 15 years. So it wasn't held up as a model to anyone. It was regarded as the third world, which it isn't now. Now, obviously it's the 5th power in the world. It's going to be the 3rd soon. And every CEO in America seems to be Indian. So that's changing.
I'm telling my husband to step it up. I'm like, come on, you're Indian.
So things are changing, and it's time that we retrieve this history that got chucked. But I think there's a few other things. There's also, I think, among Indians, this sort of narrative about how wonderful ancient India was is regarded with slight sort of cringy embarrassment by a lot of young people, because they associate it with their mad uncle who's putting WhatsApp forwards about nuclear bombs in the Mahabharata or helicopters in the Ramayana, and everyone just groans and says,
my gosh,
uncle.
Yes.
And most Indian kids, I'm sure you were one of them, got this stuff and told in a slightly sort of bonkers manner.
I got it this morning.
Yeah.
I got some scripture, some WhatsApp text about the Ramayana.
And it's often quite sort of cookie. It's quite nuts. And so this book, The Golden Road, just to remind your listeners, here it is.
Yep.
Very available at a good bookshop near you, and indeed on Amazon. Tries to root all this very clearly in an easily accessible narrative, but also in 150 pages of footnotes. So if you want to pursue this further, you've got all the stuff there you need to talk sensibly about this without sounding like your uncle.
I think that's what it is, the packaging of it all, right? Especially for kids that grew up in the West.
And I think there's also a sense in which internationally that sort of mad WhatsApp uncle existed in the historical establishment too. So there were lots of stuff written particularly in the 30s, 40s and 50s, saying that India had conquered Southeast Asia. Now, we know that not to be true. It wasn't completely clear then, but it is completely clear now. And therefore, you've had a sort of pushback against that view in Southeast Asia and China from countries that did learn a lot from India and got irritated by Indian historians telling them that they were the source of all their ideas. And in a sense, what's interesting is that Indian civilization traveled without conquest. Not only was it not sped by the jackboot and by the sword and the spear and the shield, the opposite is true. It was spread by missionaries, and it was just their sophistication and their eloquence that impressed people across Asia, and got them. It's one of the few examples of a religion traveling, because even Christianity, if you think of how Christianity came to Latin America with the Spanish conquistadors, or the Crusaders in the Middle East, and obviously Islam, as we all know, spread by the sword through Persia and into India. So the spread of Buddhism and Hinduism is interesting in that it is a rare exception of something spreading completely peacefully, and it wasn't, as the 1930s historians would boast, Indian warships landing on the shores of Southeast Asia. It was something more subtle and more interesting.
Yeah. You said it. You actually did say that when I saw you said that it's a religion and culture spread by spirit, not by sword. Which I thought was beautifully said. Before we get to the last part, because I know you have to head out in a bit, what would you consider India's greatest export then?
Zero.
Okay. I thought you were going to say Buddhism, so I wasn't sure. Okay.
No, I'd probably say zero. I mean, in that it went all around the world. If you had one idea that changed everything, it was zero. But the number system and zero together. But there's a whole portfolio of stuff. And if you go particularly anywhere in Asia, you go to Cambodia or Laos or Thailand, it's not just Buddhism per se. It's not just the religion, or Hinduism in Bali. It's a whole aesthetic. It's a whole form of sculpture, of dance, of music, of storytelling. And there is a whole world of the Indian epics, the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, which is absolutely massive still in Muslim countries like Java and Indonesia. I mean, when I was wandering around Java, I ended up pottering around looking at a temple that was turned out to be next to the Royal Palace. And I could hear this noise of those xylophones that they have in Southeast Asia. So being the nosy bugger I am, I just walked into this and came across on the outskirts of this palace, this dance practice going on. And they were practicing the Ramayana for a Muslim royal family. And this is not a surprise. This is completely ordinary in Indonesia. We sometimes think of Islam and Hinduism as being naturally opposed. That's not the case historically, and it's not the case in Java. I mean, there are moments when they've clashed, certainly, but there are also moments when the two have come together. And in Java, they've always been together. And, the national airline of the Muslim country of Indonesia is Garuda, who is Hindus know as the mount of Lord Vishnu, the eagle who carries Lord Vishnu.
I feel like you need a platform, William, to talk about this.
What's wrong with Tuckered Out? There's my platform.
No, meaning for right now, the current state of India and Pakistan, they need you up there.
You're very
discussing this
to that sacrificial feast.
Yeah, safe in a safe area, but it's just these kind of things, this history that people need to understand more and more, and how.
And it's not just Indonesia. I mean, unquestionably, there are 100 conflicts between Hindus and Muslims that you can point to historically, but there are 100 moments when the Rajputs and the Mughals were allied together to fight the Deccanese sultanates or whatever in the middle of India. There's both, and history is a very wide spread of different stories, and just to look on the stories of conflict is very one-sided.
Well, it's people like you that keep this history alive and factual, because I feel like nowadays you don't know what's right and wrong and who's saying what. And
I mean, this last week has been fascinating. I don't know how many Pakistani friends you have, but I mean, the stories that were coming from Pakistani friends and the stories that were coming from Indian friends, they had no factual commonality at all.
Yeah.
They were two completely different narratives being spun.
I'm getting a lot more from the Indian side, but I definitely have a few Pakistani friends, and I don't even know how to respond to any of it. It's just insanity.
The nice thing is that both sides seem very happy. They both think they won. Everyone's thrilled.
They're both proud of themselves. I'm
both
like,
governments are now more popular than they were.
Yeah, I was like, maybe this helps everyone that no one knows the truth. I have no idea. It's a tragedy.
That is tragically the truth. That there is a terrible, and this is what keeps the whole thing rolling, is that this is something which traditionally has always helped governments on both sides. You just wave your flag and rattle your saber, and the conflict. The people that lose, of course, are the Kashmiris at the center of the conflict, who are getting shelled by both sides.
My parents are 75 and 83, and I'm sure you probably would already know their point of view on things. And I've tried talking to them about being open to other facts and thoughts, but at this point, they've lived through their version of India. So
yeah. It's a complicated story, but I think certainly the time to persuade your parents is probably not in the middle of a war. When,
right. I'll let it go.
Have another go later.
Yeah, I was like, here, read this book instead. How about that? How about you do that? Okay, we're gonna do a fast round. So first thing that comes to your mind. I'm
useless at fast rounds. I can never think of the answers.
I feel like
they always come half an hour later.
You're gonna be a pro.
This is why I'm a better writer than a broadcaster. Because I get it eventually, but
no, you are fantastic. Biggest pet peeve?
Oh, Scottish weather.
Your favorite Bollywood movie?
Mughal Azam. Quickly following up as favorite Indian actress.
Which one?
Madhubala.
Ah, wow. Classics. Tell me your favorite one-liner in Hindi. Or a few.
I can pass on the one-liners in any language.
Okay. Or maybe favorite word in Hindi.
I mean, I live in Delhi, which is a Punjabi town, so you can't move out the house. Someone shouting "Benchon" at you.
See, it has to be Bencho. That's like a go-to. That's what I was using when I was
non-Hindi speakers have to look up.
Yeah, I might write that in my footnotes. So my husband and I lived there for 3 years, and I think I was quickly telling you I lived in Gurgaon and Bangalore, and I quickly learned how to yell a lot.
What's interesting, if you look at the early East India Company accounts, people were shouting that at the East India Company whiteys in 1590, the same words. We are told, says the Tudor Chronicle, that we are Betty Chudes.
I might use that from now on.
Bettychude, which is like 2 words.
You know what? I'm gonna spell that out in my notes and just go with that.
Betty Chude.
If there was a movie made about you, which actor would you want to play you?
Oh God, there is one actor who actually looks very, very like me, and I often get a Hindi villain. But no, if I was to choose, Shah Rukh Khan, of course.
All right,
but
amazing.
No, I would never be mistaken for him in a month of Sundays. But,
I mean, he just went to the Met Gala, so
the one. My favourite of all those actors, though, I think of that, particularly that posse, is Amir Khan, who's the brightest and the nicest. And we almost share a birthday. He was born one day before me.
Have you met him?
I have met him. I know him well, yeah. And he's 19th of March, 1965. Okay. And I am 20th of March, 1965. He's a day older than me.
I had 3 posters above my bed of boys. It was Agassi, Keanu Reeves, and Amir Khan.
Which Amir Khan, in the sense of what phase? Of
the Dil phase. It was like early 1990s. He
with her fluffy hair, big hair.
Yeah, he was a very pretty boy.
He was.
Yes, very pretty. But like, I've loved him and Madhuri. I think are the ultimate for me Bollywood icons.
So there's one occasion when I had a party thrown for me in New York, and it was all these white guys all dressed up as Indians, and the only people that hadn't got the dress code was Amir, who I'd met the previous week. He said he's going to be in New York, so to come along to this. And the most famous, one of the 2 or 3 most famous Indians in the world. In this crowd, no one knew who he was. It was a white American audience. And he was dressed in a kind of leather jacket and torn jeans, and they were all dressed in sort of pantomime turbans.
This is not surprising to me for some reason.
And he and Rani Mukherjee walked into this party, and no one batted an eyelid. Both of them at the height of their fame. Rani looking absolutely $1 million too. The only people who recognised them was the Pakistani Qawwali crew who were there playing, who played Kuch Kuch Hote, whatever it was on the the song.
That's amazing. We'll have to exchange some. I worked in Bombay for a year before law school. I have some Jackie Schroff stories and
I bet
others.
You had some fun.
Smoking a beanie with him and a few others.
I enjoyed Bombay. I'm very much a Delhi boy, and Delhi's home, and I love Delhi and will always live there despite everything. But Bombay is where I go for fun, and I've had a lot of fun with all those sort of guys over the years. Yeah,
definitely some good stories locked in my memory from those days before husband and kids. It was great.
No, we've all had those days.
Many Goa nights. Let me just say that.
Yep. No, I'm getting all the footnotes here.
Yes. Ultimate collaboration for you this year.
So I'm very excited that my last book, The Anarchy, has just been taken on by the director Stephen Frears, who did movies like Dangerous Liaisons, High Fidelity, one of my favorite.
John Cusack.
Great movie. John Cusack, exactly.
That's my fourth poster.
Exactly. What else do I love of his? Beautiful Laundrette. I mean, there's so many. There's and then all those Irish ones, The Snapper, The Van, and all those movies.
Congrats.
And recently, Victoria and Abdul and Philomena, all great movies.
Yeah.
So I'm very, very pleased. He's also absolutely wonderful. He's a grumpy old guy. He's very funny, very dry, very terse, and just produces this succession of amazing movies. So I'm very pleased with that. So that's my collaboration.
Congratulations. Very excited to learn more. What do you want to be when you grow up?
I mean, all I've ever wanted to be really is what I am now, pathetically.
Okay. No.
But if I had a second life, what would I be? So I was a country boy. I grew up in the country, and I'm very surprised to find that at 60, I've ended up living most of my life in towns, in big cities like Delhi and London. And there is another life that, the life that I didn't lead, that would have lived in Goa or Kerala or somewhere nice in the Highlands of Scotland or the borders of Scotland or something, as my brothers all do still.
Still can happen.
And I always wonder what would have happened. But in the end, this is the life I built, and it's a good one.
It seems like it worked out.
Yeah.
Okay, 2 more questions, and then I promise I'll let you go. This podcast is called Tuckered Out with Ami Tucker, because I like to ask trailblazers and leaders and experts like you guys a time you got tuckered out.
Fun enough, at the moment, I'm pretty tuckered out because my podcast, which I took on without really thinking about it, and it's a history podcast called Empire that deals with colonial history. Things with these sort of things is that you initially do all the stuff you know really well. So I talked about India a lot and talked about the Ottoman Empire and the Middle East. 3 years on, though, I've kind of run out of stuff I really know well. And it's only now that I'm realizing how much work this is. And it's like being back at college when it's, you wake up Monday morning, you think, Christ, I've got 3 enormous fat books to read by Thursday to make an intelligent, conversation about. And I've just got back from a very tiring book tour in the United States. And this morning I was up at 6 reading. There are worse fates than sitting in a nice garden reading a book. But there's no question of. And I was up till midnight doing the same thing last night. So I find myself reading more and sleeping less than I would like to by a factor of 100 at the moment. And I do long for just being able to just sit on a beach somewhere and just
unplug.
Fiddle with Instagram or some rubbish like that.
Oh, trust me, you're not missing anything. It's actually more
WhatsApp forwards.
That makes me tuckered out. So I think what you're doing is correct.
Before we finish, I've just been looking at these guitars behind you. And I'm going to have to ask you. You have to sing. You have to sing one line and strum one chord.
I think half of them are actually broken. 3 of them are my kids who have started. I used to think I was going to be in a band. When I moved to India, I DJ'd at farmhouses around Delhi because I was like, I've always wanted to be a musician, but was never good enough. And then as time and age.
You were there with the headphones, same headphones.
Yeah, I went to the school, DJ school in India Delhi called Spin Gurus.
There is such a thing.
Yeah. And then I took classes. My husband was working. I was like, all of a sudden living in Delhi as a housewife, no job. So I was like, I'm either going to get a tattoo or be a DJ. I'm just going to go through. Yeah. So I was like, I did not get the tattoo yet.
I saw the tattoo. Was your friend had the tattoo? Yeah.
She did. I did not get the tattoo, but I became a DJ and would spin all these really rich kids' farm parties all around Delhi.
Well, I live on one of those farms, somebody else's farm. I'm a tenant to one of those farms. And we've had some pretty good parties.
Delhi,
we've had some pretty good noisy parties.
I can DJ for you next time.
We've got two friends. Do you know Anushka,
yes, of course,
who's very good, and Sri K, who are two go-to Indian lady DJs.
Yes, Anushka's sister and I worked together in Delhi.
She's great.
I met her a few times. She was dating a big musician, Karsh
She
Kale.
was dating a big musician,
right? Karsh,
from the medieval pundits.
Yes. I've hung out. I've had many nights out with that crew.
She does good nights out.
Yes. It was a good time. I could hang.
She actually has one of the best Instagram feeds. To keep a boy awake at night. It's
definitely.
She's eternal because that feed has been there for about 20 years. And it never seems to age one day. I don't know
like
what
her
it is with.
too, though.
There's a thing I think about Malu jeans. The Malus just seem to have this sort of secret of eternity. On the way back from JFK, I was in the security queue with Lakshmi Menon, the other great Malu beauty model, and she'd just been modeling in New York. She must be 45 now. She cannot be any younger than that because I've known her 20 years and she was about 25 then. Not a wrinkle anywhere. It is a very enviable complexion.
Diet, jeans, Well,
fish. Eating fish.
Fish, definitely. So then I got to ask, since we're talking about music, because I'm a concert fiend. Best concert you've ever been to?
Oh, that could be a whole podcast in itself.
Until you need to go, I'm like, let me get this one in.
So the best, maybe not the best concert, but the best moment at a concert was in the mid-1980s going to see The Clash in Rome.
Nice answer.
And they were playing in the Velodrome in the EUR, which is this sort of big fascist complex on the outskirts of Rome. And we were pretty sure they were going to be playing late, so we took our time arriving, and we were about sort of 20 minutes after and then the first bars of London Calling opened up. And it was like a movie because there were all these arc lights beaming down on us, and we were running through this space to try and get to it. And there was Joe Strummer, and you could hear these very familiar first chords of London Calling. And that's the closest to anything in real life that's ever been like a movie to me. It was like the opening of some incredible video or something. It was lovely.
It's my happy place. I just went to LCD Sound System a few weeks ago. I'm taking my daughter to see OMD in a few weeks. And then we're going to Mexico City this year to go see Oasis because I've never seen them.
There's some good music in Mexico.
Yeah. Mexico City has become one of my favorites, for sure.
Years ago, also, that same era, to Live Aid.
How was that? That must have been amazing.
And I kind of saw everyone,
Yeah.
Bowie, Queen, the whole lot. They were all there.
Even, wasn't U2 there? Wasn't everyone there?
U2 was there. Everyone was there. All that generation. Annie Lennox. Yeah.
That's historic right there. That's amazing. Well, I don't want to keep you much longer.
Thank you very much. I have to go, but that was great fun.
Tuckered Out is hosted by me, Ami Tucker. This episode is produced by Genie Media with Jeannie Saraswati, Ashley Tuff, Micah Sweetman, Hans Andres, and Laura Radescu. You can follow me at Tuckered Out Podcast on Instagram. And please subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast.